Welcome to the first class for Advanced Excel, and in this class I'll be introducing you to Excel, and I'll work under the assumption that we're all beginners, but the goal is for me to take you through the Advanced Excel. So first, let's start by understanding the different interfaces that are there. And when you open Advanced Excel, the first thing you'll notice that you'll see it's written book. So this time I'm having book 2. On your end, if you go and open the Excel software, you'll be having book 1. So I want you to envision this software as a book. And if you have a book, then a book has pages. And in this instance, we will refer worksheets as pages. Of course, you can write in any page and we'll have a chance to interact with different worksheets as we move on. And apart from the pages which are worksheets, we also have tabs. And with tabs, you can notice that I have a tab called developer. I'm not so sure if you're having developer on your end, but if you don't have, you can customize your tab by selecting other tabs that are not active. And I want you to have this tab called developer because in our later class, I'll be introducing the concept of macros. And as you can see, if I go to developer, I have something like record macros. So we will be learning that. So how will you be able to get this developer tab? Just go to file on your side, go to file, options, custom ribbon. And then among the options presented, make sure developer is checked. So at the moment on your end, it should be like this. So if you check it and click OK, you will realize that now you have developer tab somewhere here. Let's talk about ribbon. And for ribbon is this section. So if you look at this part here, and it has been segmented based on what you can do. And of course, we'll see on other ways in which you can add other items on the ribbon. I think we can also do the same right now. Now that we know how to add tabs, we can also have a ribbon for data analysis. And for that, we'll have to put it as an add-in. So we will follow the same procedure. File, options. This time we'll say add-in. So we're not customizing the ribbon because we're talking about, of course, adding some of the add-ins. So the add-in I want is analysis toolpack. And this is what enables you to perform statistical analysis using now also Excel. So if you don't have SPSS, you don't have to worry because you can also use Excel for the same. So if I click on analysis toolpack and then click on go, I'll select all the items presented and then OK. And now if I go to the tab data, so pay attention here, you should be able to have analysis toolpack. So there you go. As you can now see, at the moment, I have data analysis part. So this is what you'll be able to perform all these statistical concepts. Of course, the same thing that you have done in the SPSS session. Now, let's go to the real stuff. And in this class, I want to assume that you guys are trainers or maybe teachers in a high school. And your job is to develop a database. And in this database, you want to have information on your student based on some subject. So you give them some subject and say, maybe at the end of that term, your goal is to assign grades. So how do we do that? So we're going to develop some database, and then we also come up with some reporting. And of course, I will have to introduce two terms because moving forward, I'll require you to be using them more often. So one, we need to know what is autofilling. Two, we need to know what is highlighting. One, we need to know what is to highlight. Two, we need to know what is autofill. So I'll develop the database by first having index number. So just go to cell A1 because that's how we'll be identifying cells. So this cell A1, and I'll have index. After index, I want to have name. So this will be name of my students. I will also be comparing the gender the performance in terms of gender. After gender, now I can have the subject, and the first one is maths. I can have English. You should be developing the same database on your end. So Kiswahili. After Kiswahili, I can have science. And then social studies. So after social studies, I want to, so you can expand the size of your column by just taking your cursor in between any of the column. Then if you drag across, you'll be able to expand. Or you can also double click while the cursor is in between the column. Of course, you can see the results is the column size is adjusted. So I think this is more or less the same role as column. So if you recall in SPSS, we're talking a lot about column. So I also want to know the total marks that a student will score. I need to know the average marks, and based on the average, I can calculate some grade, and then with grade, I can have some remarks. So I've just developed this database, and we're going to key in some observation. So let's start with the two concepts that I said we need to understand. One, we need to know what is autofilling. Two, we need to know what is highlighting. So assuming we need to follow a sequence of 1 and 2. So to highlight, you take your cursor at the center of this cell, and you can see it's a bit big. So pay attention to how my cursor looks like. And if I drag down, so left click and then drag down, you will notice that I can be able to select both of those cells. So that is what it means when I say highlighting. To autofill, take your cursor at the bottom corner, and as you can see, it's dark black. And if I drag it down, I have 10 students in my class. And the next thing is I need to give them some name. So I'll have to generate some name, and so should you. And make sure you have some gender distribution for both male and female, so that later you can do some comparison in terms of performance. So do the same for gender. So for George, I'll have male and then female. So I'll be doing the same drill. If I just write female and then I press enter, makes my work easier. So if I just key in the first entry of the name, the software understands the rest. So let's introduce function, and function will enable us to generate marks for the student. And the first function that we will use is the function random between, which basically is meant to generate random numbers, and this number should be between a certain range. So we are saying generate for us random numbers which are between the range of 98 and 30. And in this case, 98 means the highest score that can student have. So for instance, the highest marks that a student can get in a maths is 98, and the lowest I say can be 30. So how will the software differentiate a function and any other text? For functions, you will start with an equal sign. So I'll say equal sign and then rand between and bottom number. So I'm using hint down here. So there's some sort of hint that is going to guide me. So the bottom number is 30, comma, the top is 98. I press enter, and then I can autofill. And remember to autofill, you take your cursor at the bottom corner, and then when it's a bit small as it is being presented, you can either drag it down or you can double click. So if I double click at this point, you'll notice that I have entries for all the students. So those are the two ways that you can be able to autofill as you also move forward. I'll do the same across, so all the way to social studies. And now I have a database. The only problem is with this database, every time I'll be performing anything. So for instance, if I come and write count here, you'll notice that the information or the observation I have keeps on changing. If I write average, as you can see, now George is scoring 75. And right there, male, the same deal. Now I'm shifting to 85. So the next thing I want us to do is to stop this data from changing so that we work with at least the values, not the formulas that is being applied. And the solution for that is to copy paste, but the pasting is we'll have to do it in a special way, whereby we'll only paste the values. And how do we do that? I'll show you two ways to highlight your entire database. So one, you can either Control A, that means you have highlighted the entire database that you have. And then if you right click, you can now copy. I use Control A. The second one, so just press the escape button in your keyboard. And the second way to highlight, which I think is more or less my favorite, so I can just click at the beginning where I want to start highlighting, and then shift down, but I'll still long press, and then go towards the end, and then press to any of the cell. And there you go. So if I copy also, and then I will paste in the new worksheet, and like I said, I will paste it as a value. So I right click, paste special, and I'll opt for values. I'll click OK. And as you can see now, I have entries, because if I even write here anything, my data is not changing. So I've already sorted that. Let's talk about total marks. And for total marks, we'll use the summation function. So equal and then sum. And you're doing sum of all the subjects from maths all the way to social studies. If I press enter, and then autofill, I'm able to get the total marks. Let's do for average. The function we use there is average. So equal average. And you're doing average of what? Again, average of all the subjects, because now the software must know how many subjects are there, because that will be the denominator. So I'll say average of maths all the way to social studies. If I press enter and autofill, I have the average marks, and now I have to reduce the decimal points that are there. So under the home tab, if I come to the ribbon number, I can note that this button is meant to decrease the decimal points that are there. So if I click on it, you can see that now I don't have decimal point. Let's compare the performance so that we see which gender was performing maybe better than the other. And first, we'll have to know the number of each group. And I will be doing count. So I want to know how many males are there, also how many females are there. And I'll be introducing now conditions. And for this one, we say count if someone is a male. And also the same for female. So the function is equal sign count if. What is the range? So I'm still using the hint down here. And the software now wants to know the range. So the range will be where I'll be getting the criteria, which is male. So I will highlight the entire column gender, comma. Now, which group do I want for gender? So I want male. So enclosed in a speech marks, and also making sure that I have caps, because the same at the database is on caps. So I'll have the criteria on caps, but enclosed in a speech box. If I press enter, I have 7 male. Let's do the same for females. But this time we're changing the criteria. So instead of male, we'll be having female. So equal sign count if range is the same, where gender will come from. I introduce speech marks and then female. I press enter. Okay, sorry. So there should be a comma between the range and the criteria. Now if I press enter, okay, what am I missing out? In the double speech mark. So if I press enter, now I can have 3 females and 7 males. So let's go ahead and look at the performance so that you know which group had the highest average score. So I will start with the males, and to get the performance for average score, I will use average with a condition. So average if, say equal sign average, but average if. And of course, if you want to understand what the function will do, so just take your cursor and point to the function, and as you can see, it says finds average or the arithmetic mean for the cells specified by a given condition or a criteria. So that is what we want to do. If I select average if, I'm guided by range, and I said range will be where we're going to get the criteria. So I'll select the entire gender, comma, criteria is male, then after male, average range now becomes the subject. So what subject are we doing average? So is the entire subject. And if I press enter, I see that I have 64.85 for male. For female, I'll do the same approach, equal sign, and then average if, range is where the gender will come from. So criteria will be female this time, but now enclosed in a speech mark. And this is so because it's a text, comma, average range is still the entire subject. And if I press enter, now I have 78 for female. So in this case, it's, so let me reduce first the decimal point here. And I can say it might not be true that the average for females is higher because they're actually performing better than males, but you can note that there are only 3 out of 7. So one of the factor or the limitation of measures of central tendency is on the denominator. So the lower the denominator, the higher the mean or the average. So that might be the case in this study. But now that I'm not teaching statistics, I think that is a conversation you should have during SPSS and STATA class. Let's talk about remarks. And I'm going to remarks because how I will approach having remarks for all the students will set the pace for grade, because the end goal here is assigning some grade to this student. Now, what do I want here? I want to come up with a scenario whereby I said if a student scores less than 40, then under remarks, I will say that student has failed. If a student is not scoring something which is less than 40, that means it's something higher than 40, then I'll say the student is, or the student has passed. So let's see how I can achieve that by introducing logic test. And I will say equal sign, and then if, what's the logic test? I'm creating a logic whereby I say if your average is something that is less than 40 marks, so that's the cut point, then I'll say let the software, if that is true, so value if true, I'll say let the software tell me that you have failed, comma, if you have not failed, then I will have pass. I press enter, and then autofill, and of course all my students are passing, so maybe let me reduce marks for one student so that we see if my logic works. So there you go. As you can see now I have Ian, and Ian is now failed, so it means my logic is correct. So based on the same, we will borrow for now the grading system, and I will have a situation whereby if your average is less than 40, this time I want the grade to be E. So the software should return to me E. Okay. So I prefer having like this. And then I say if the average is something which is less than 50, that means the student is scoring some marks between 50 and 40, then I'll say let the software give me a grade of D. I'll follow the same drill. If average is less than 60, then I'll say let the software give me a C. Average is less than 70, then the grade should be B. So for the last part, I'll say otherwise. So if value falls, if you're not getting any of the grades presented, then it means automatically you're getting a A. Or you can instruct the software by now introducing, if your average is greater than 70, then that is when you will get a grade of A. So I'll not be using these in this class, but I think you can have this as your assignment. So try and see if you can change or use the greater than sign to see if you can be able to achieve the same goal. But for me, I would just say, if you're not having any of the grade between B and E, otherwise I'll just give you an A. So let's see how that will work. And I'll be using what we call nested if. So I'll start with an equal sign, and then if the logic test is the average is less than 40. So this will be my guide, comma, let the software assign you a grade of E, comma, if you're not getting a grade of E, then I'll introduce another if. And I'll say this time, if your average is less than 50, that means this student is now scoring between 40 and 50. If the average is less than 50, comma, value is true, then the software should give you a grade of D, comma, value false, I introduce another if statement. I'll say if your average is less than 60. Now the grade is true, comma, I'll say let the software give you a grade of C, comma, if that's not the case, another if statement. Logic test, average is less than 70, comma, value if true, let the software give you a grade of B, comma, if that's not the case, then I'll say let the software give you an A. So you're not scoring any of the grades presented. So I said the other approach, which I say you now use the greater than sign, I want you to use that as an assignment so that you see if you can be able to achieve this. So I'll press enter, and the software now wants to know if it can assign for me the grade, sorry, the brackets. So I'll just click yes, and if I autofill, you can see that I have grades for all the students. This will mark the end of my class, and we'll meet in the next class whereby we'll be using the dataset masters data. Thank you for your time.